Hello guys, welcome to MTG Explained. Today we'll be going over our Turbo Fog deck we have previously released a video on, but we're giving an update because some of those cards that were in that deck have been banned by Wizards of the Coast recently, such as Teferi, Time Raveler, and Growth Spiral. So let's take a look at this deck, and for those of you that have not seen that video, just a rundown basically what this deck is. It's a deck that you use fog effects such as Root Snare, Pause for Reflection, Thwart the Enemy, trying to delay the damage that's coming in from creatures your opponent's using, which delays the game, allowing you to play cards like Teferi Tutelage to try to mill your opponent. So this deck works very well. The idea is you have Teferi Tutelage down, you have cards that allow you to draw cards that help Teferi Tutelage start milling your opponent. Such as Teferi Master of Time, right? This guy, you plus him on your turn, it mills. Then you plus them on your opponent's turn, it mills them because you are drawing a card and then you're discarding a card, which triggers Teferi Tutelage. And then the fog effects protect you and Teferi Master of Time from enemies that are swinging at you. You also got board wipe, such as Shatter the Sky, to just wipe out the field, kind of reset. You know, you board wipe, they start throwing a bunch of creatures down, so you just kind of wipe it. You also got Euro. There's a second win con in the deck. He gains you some life, draws a card, which helps trigger Teferi Tutelage. And he's a 6/6 creature, you know, eventually, because you're throwing a lot of cards in the graveyard with Teferi Master of Time, even Tutelage throws a card in the graveyard. So eventually you'll be able to escape Euro from the graveyard. And he's a secondary win con. He also helps delay the game even longer and lets you draw more cards, which ultimately lets you mill out your opponent. Now, previously, this deck had been running 3 Teferi Time Ravelers and 4 Growth Spirals. Recently, though, those cards got banned, so we replaced those cards. I want to get the updated list here. We added Narset Parvels in replacement of Teferi. This card actually works pretty well in this deck because it helps us search for, you know, any non-creature spells, so we can get our, you know, Teferi Master of Time. We can get our Teferi Tutelage, which helps us, you know, get those combo pieces off. It helps us get the mill strategy going. And it also helps you get those fog effects when you need them, because sometimes you just need to get those fogs just to survive a little bit longer before you can mill them out. So Narset definitely helps us get there. So Narset, definitely a good card in this deck. It also has, you know, the stack ability where each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. Also pretty useful against certain decks. Helps you against other, you know, Euro decks and things like that. So definitely useful card. It's not Teferi Time Raveler, but it does a pretty good job of filling that spot. So been working pretty well. Narset. Second, we had to replace the Growth Spirals. So we replaced the Growth Spirals with Fanatic Inventory. Now this card is actually surprisingly does pretty well in this deck because of the ability that it gets better, has more of them are in the graveyard. So that's just another card that does well in the graveyard. So when your Teferi Master of Time, you know, you plus it, you don't feel too bad about throwing a Fanatic Inventory in the graveyard, because then your next Fanatic Inventory is just going to be a little bit stronger, and then a little bit stronger, and a little bit stronger, right? So they just get better and better and better in the late game. So it works pretty good with Teferi Master of Time. It's a good card you can pitch in the graveyard, since you are throwing a lot of cards in the graveyard in this deck. It helps you draw cards, so the more cards you draw, the more triggers Teferi Tutelage hits off. So it works pretty good with Teferi Tutelage. It worked good with Teferi Master of Time. It helps you get the cards you need, perhaps fog effects and whatnot. So it definitely is a good replacement for Growth Spiral. It doesn't help you ramp up, though. That's the only downside to this card. It doesn't help you ramp up, but you do draw more cards with this card. So I do like that. It kind of speeds up the deck a little bit in that fashion of the mill effect. Now, since we aren't ramping up, I went ahead and priorly this deck had Ugin and it had Discontinuity. So I went ahead and removed those cards and I added Teferi's Ageless Insight. Now, this card surprisingly has been working pretty well. Whenever you draw a card, except for the first one on each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. This gets ridiculous quickly. It works amazingly well with Teferi Master of Time, has in you drawing 2 cards instead of 1, and you only have to discard 1, so you're gaining cards there. It works perfect with Teferi Tutelage because the more cards you're drawing, the more you're milling them, so it goes a lot quicker. It speeds up that mill clock a lot quicker with Teferi Ageless Insight. And Fnatic inventories, you start drawing 3 to 4 cards. You start drawing double, right? So it starts being 4 to 6 cards and things like that. So it gets pretty ridiculous. You start milling them really quickly. This card is actually been really good and been speeding up the mill game. If you're able to get this down and it stays down. It also helps Euro come in, draw 2 cards. It's just a really good cards. And the fact that we're running fog effects, we can get away with playing this. We can get away with using a turn to play Teferi's Ageless Insight, because we can just fog, if they come at us. If they come out with a lot of creatures, we just fog it. So this card has been doing pretty well, kind of speeds up the game. I like this revision of the deck, so it's still doing pretty well. Even though after the bans we lost the Teferi Time Raveler and we watched Growth Spiral, this deck has still been doing pretty good. I've been winning games. So definitely check the deck out. I put a deck list in the description. Also check our other video if you want to see some gameplay of the original deck before the bans. Please check those out. But yeah, definitely this deck is not done after the rotation. After the bans, this deck is not done. So definitely check it out. The bans did not stop this deck. Please comment below if you have played this deck, if you like it, what decks are you playing after those bans. What have you guys been doing as far as new decks being constructed or whatnot. Please like this video too, and subscribe to our channel if you like this content. But we do appreciate you guys watching, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks.